Hello, detectives. My name is David, and I am your host for this brand new Disco Elysium podcast, A Human Can Opener. As this is the first episode of the series, I just need to do a little bit of housekeeping and bring you up to speed on what we aim to do with this podcast. This is first and foremost a video series for the 41st Precinct YouTube channel. As such, that means that videos will take priority. It also means that I have a small group of paying members on the channel who I'm obliged to provide this with early access a week before anybody else. That's not a plug for you to join. I just need to be transparent about where we're at with the content and when it's released. Audio podcast services, as a result, will get the episode at the same time that it's released to the general, the viewership. Okay, so that's that bit done. The idea behind this series was to explore the varying viewpoints and experiences of Disco Elysium creators, members of the cast, and people behind the creation of the game. And just like our favourite detective in the game, I will act as the human can opener and ask them lots of questions. It's a simple enough concept that Idiot Doom Spiral would reject at the first suggestion, but one I hope will bring new life to Elysium. Each interview will be slightly different for each guest, as I will naturally tailor questions to their relationship with the game, but I will have some uniform questions as the opening section with community questions at the end. So, on to the important bit. It is my pleasure to introduce my very first guest on Human Can Opener. With over 26,000 subscribers, he is the curator of the biggest Disco Elysium channel on YouTube, known for his incredibly insightful video essays exploring the lore of Elysium, the excellent streamer trilogy, and a knack for finding the perfect joke to remark on the game's writing and themes. I will call him Danny for the purposes of normal human social constructs, but you will know him as none other than Jamrock Hobo.
Thank you so much for having me, David. And thank you for the far too kind introduction. I'm very happy that you're doing this podcast series, and I'm equally happy to be your first guest.
So, I do have some questions to ask you, which are standard questions, which I'm going to ask everybody, right? I think they are just some nice little get-to-know-you questions, build a picture of who you are beyond Elysium, but then we'll segue it into Elysium as well.
Yeah, sure.
So, I guess really this is just kind of looking at how you eventually got to Elysium in the first place. So what's your history, first of all, with gaming in general? What kind of games did you like playing when you were growing up?
So I grew up in a village in northern Germany. My parents did not have too much money, so at some point we had a PC, but we never really had PC games. Until at some point, my dad had a new colleague who was who was in the internet at that time already, and from that point on he gave us like a small folder of CD-ROMs of correct video games of the late 90s, early 2000s, and that was my utopia. So I ended up playing actually more video games than most of my friends. So I had like these early RPGs, Divine Divinity, for example, the very early game of the Larian studio who now made Baldur's Gate 3, like Age of Empires, stuff like that, these early classics. At some point I got a Nintendo GameCube from my mom, and I think that was like the prime of console gaming for me at that time. PlayStation 2, GameCube, there's no better feeling than playing Smash Brothers Melee with your friends on the couch.
Absolutely, yeah. Those were the days. I think we're the same kind of generation, actually, because PS2 was... I mean, a PS1 was kind of around at the time when I was growing up, but...
It wasn't that widespread, right? Not everyone just had a PlayStation around in their...
it was a luxury item, I think, at the time when it came out. And in fact, actually, I believe there was an issue, certainly in the UK, that, you know, houses were getting burgled and stuff because the PlayStation was like this hot item that everybody had to get. Now the scalpers just get them. They steal from you another way now, don't they? By launching a load of bots at a website.
Not so much has changed, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's just done in a much smarter way. So I have to ask them, what would you say? Okay, I have to exclude Disco Elysium from this question, of course. But what is your favorite game of all time?
I would say World of Warcraft. 2003 from release date until like 2009-10, it was a unique experience. People never played a online game before, like most of the players. Everyone was really, let's say, stupid. Everyone needed help for the most basic quests, so we banded together in a guild, small groups, and just tried to conquer this game. It was a magical time at that time, and I don't think you can recapture that. We have like World of Warcraft Classic and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's a moment in time, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's this early gaming era, 2000s. Nobody was really a gamer. Nobody knew what they were doing. We were all just trying to beat this game. It was fantastic.
Yeah, so I missed out on World of Warcraft, but I'm well aware of the Leroy Jenkins.
Oh yeah, that's a classic.
And I actually only learned that. So I'm big into Hearthstone actually. So a lot of what I know about the World of Warcraft is through that. And there was a card. In Hearthstone, it was Leroy Jenkins. When you play it, it says Leroy Jenkins.
I remember that.
Yeah, so then I went back and found it. It's just such a funny, like for anyone who's not seen that, is one of the funniest situations I've ever seen in an online game. So basically, what happened? They're all kind of discussing a strategy, right? A bunch of people on WoW were talking about what they're going to do, and they're doing all their prep. And there's Leroy Jenkins who's AFK. So he's obviously missed all of this deep strategy and approach to how they're going to deal with this, I guess, a raid or something like that. He obviously comes straight back to the keyboard, doesn't give it a minute's thought, and just kamikazes in, screaming his name, Leroy Jenkins, and just dives into this raid. It's honestly, anyone who hasn't seen it, YouTube it. It's fantastic.
And that's the magic of like these early MMORPGs. Today, it's like far too professionalized. Everyone is far too good. If you pulled that today, you would just be banned from all guilds across all World of Warcraft servers, and nobody would talk to you. And back in the day, it was like, that was kind of fun. Let's do it again.
I mean, you can't even play something like Dead by Daylight now without someone saying, "Oh, you're not doing it properly." I've heard there's like real issues in even games like that now where people are really picky about how you approach it. Okay, brilliant. That's a really cool answer. Thank you. And outside of gaming, I know you are an avid reader, as you've mentioned in some of your videos, but I'd also like to know just generally what kind of TV, books, movies are you into? A couple of the community questions were around that as well. So I think people are fascinated by the kind of media you consume outside of games.
Yeah, so let me think a second. So if we're talking about like shows, I think you kind of know that it's True Detective for me, season 1. I think it's a masterpiece. It's one of my most reviewed pieces of media out there.
I would actually argue, and I think many people who've seen it, I think it's, in my opinion, the single best season of any TV show that's ever been made. And that
might very well be.
I think season 4 of The Wire. Have you seen The Wire?
I've seen season 1, which was amazing. I did not start season 2 yet.
Okay, you need to do that because Jimmy McNulty is basically Harry Dubois. If Harry was, I don't know. Actually, I was going to say more stable, but I don't know if that's necessarily true. No, True Detective. I think Rust Cole is someone who's often compared to Harry. Someone remarked actually on Reddit recently when I brought this up that the only real difference between the two of them is that Rust Cole is absolutely certain of who he is and what he is, whereas obviously the whole point of Dubois is that he hasn't got a clue, really.
Totally, yeah. You just cover it for him.
Yeah. It was actually one of your meme videos that made me rewatch True Detective. The stop saying weird shit. That also inspired me to do some of the more animated meme stuff because I was like, how's he done that? He's like got Kim and Harry's face on the two detectives from True Detective. So you were an inspiration to me, Danny, when you made that meme, which I can't imagine you anticipated.
But you followed up by doing some actually advanced stuff with the Disco Elysium X True Detective intro with the smoke and all. That was like really cool.
Yeah, and do you know that's probably the thing I'm most proud of, if I'm honest. But again, it's like one of those things where you're always picking up off things you see and things you consume, right? So it's not fair for me to take credit for what was already a creation in the True Detective intro. I guess it's just like one of those things. You think, well, you give it a try, don't you?
Yeah, exactly.
Movies? Any particular movies that like that jumped to your head that you'd recommend?
I thought about that when I saw like some question in the community asking for movies, and I must admit I was never a very cultivated like enjoyer of good movies. I think my favorite movies are probably like martial arts movies that my big brother showed me like 10 years ago, some old Jackie Chan stuff. Ip Man with Donnie Yen, this kung fu movie. Um, let me think. I think there's, if that counts, one animation movie, 1995, Ghost in the Shell. It's an amazing movie. Everyone should watch it. There's the scene where the camera goes through the city, follows a ship, and you just see these futuristic but yet very trashed and crowded streets, and this woman's choir sings in the background. I think that's one of the most magical scenes in like all the history of animated cinema. It's amazing.
Yeah, I loved Ghost in the Shell. I thought it was an absolute masterpiece.
Yeah.
There was a period in my life where a few friends of mine, when I was living in London, and was about 18, 19 or something, and I got introduced to like Akira, Ghost in the Shell, Ninja Scrolls, just all of these like anime films that people really rated quite highly. And I remember being surprised at the time by how dark anime could get. Because I think, as a young man, late teens, you're only exposed to animation as, I don't know, like Disney and just all the fluffy stuff, right? And then I was seeing all this animation. It was like violent and visceral. I was like, wow, this is absolutely incredible. And Ghost in the Shell went on to inspire things like The Matrix, of course.
Totally, yeah. Incredibly important piece of cinema history, yeah.
Yeah, it's a good choice. There you go. That's and I guess the final one, and this, so few people had mentioned books in the community questions, and I know that during your video on the Pale and Sacred and Terrible Air, you'd mentioned that you're quite a big fan of complex books. So there were members of the community saying, did you have any recommendations for books of that nature? And I guess this is an opportunity for you to recommend any that you absolutely would rate highly to anyone.
I don't really know books that remind me of Disco Elysium. I don't think. If I had to say my favorite book, and I might sound pretentious, but I do love the classics. I think Friedrich Hölderlin's Hyperion, that's like a very old novel, late 1700. It's very beautiful. It's quite short, though. It's very full of this kitschy yearning for love and nature. And when you really embrace the emotions and not view it from this 2000s ironic level, it's a very beautiful book. And besides that, I think I've just read a lot through just my university life back then. I kept a lot of books. And yeah, Hölderlin, Goethe, I do like the classics. Yeah. And of course, like theory, obviously. In my Disco Elysium Lore video, I talked a bit about that. Walter Benjamin and all these people. I think they do have a lot to say about how to interpret this kind of apocalyptic end of history kind of media that Disco Elysium is among too. Excellent,
thank you. Not much of an avid reader, actually. I'm really guilty of being, so I'm really picky with media in general. It took me a long time to get on board with Game of Thrones, for example, because I had this this stupid if it's popular, it can't possibly be good attitude towards it.
Yeah, I totally get that.
I was like, well, there's no way the general public have picked something actually good here. And they were right. They were correct until, the end, obviously.
Yeah, totally. I had the same with video games, I think, where every time people said, oh, this small indie fan favorite is so crazily intelligent and smart and great, I think it's probably not that great if so many people talk about it. And I had that with Disco Elysium, actually. I did not play it because so many people were like, oh my god, Disco Elysium, you need to play it. And I thought, if so many people recommend it to me, it can't really be that good, right?
I did have a similar thing. Yeah, I mean, we'll come back to that because I think some of the question is around our experience with Disco Elysium in the first place. So I don't think it's an experience that's rare, actually. So we'll come back to it. Okay, so in fact, actually, my next question: what is your history with Disco Elysium? How did you discover the game, and how was the first playthrough?
I played Disco Elysium pretty late when it was already the final cut. I think 2 years ago. I looked for my oldest tweet mentioning Disco Elysium, and it was like August 2022 or something.
Yeah.
I actually installed it earlier, and I deinstalled it because I went through the opening sequence of this pitch black sequence, and your brain is talking to you, and I thought like, this is not very stimulating. I'm a little bored, and I just uninstalled the game. Installed it like 6 months later when I saw that, whoa, Disco Elysium is #1 on Metacritic. It can't be that bad, right? And it's gonna get better probably. So I continued playing it, and I think it needed a bit, but I did fell in love with it after a while. I can't even tell when it really happened, but I think when this whole like political situation in Revachol unraveled for me, and oh, there's the strike and there's Joyce, and oh my god, what are they doing? And this is so the it just goes so deep, the story, the political aspects, and then also, of course, the writing for every character was amazing. So it needed a bit, but it did catch me after a while. And that was when I think my hope for video games was healed a bit, because I was always this kind of player of not really these deep and profound games, because I always thought, they can't be that good, because for me the medium of like art and thought were always books, and video games were entertainment for me. So I played, World of Warcraft, Overwatch, Hearthstone, Apex Legends, Tekken in my free time. And I never really thought that video games would create the same level of depth that I know from other media. And Disco Elysium did prove me wrong. I was a pessimist about video games a very long time. And I think what Disco Elysium then did is that it took like actual political art and thought into a medium suitable for mass consumption. And for some reason it succeeded. And I think that's like the genius of the game.
I kept seeing this game was amazing, right? And it was a detective RPG, and I was like, so I was really big on games like Broken Sword growing up. Point and click, a lot of the old Scum VM kind of point and click adventures. And to your point about dark stories, I had had exposure to The Last of Us, which was up until I played Disco Elysium was my favorite game of all time. So, and I don't really think Disco Elysium jumped out at me as something that was going to be, thematically similar in some ways. I mean, there's lots of differences, obviously, but the thing that kept worrying me about it is I've always been a little bit crap at CRPGs. I always struggled with like the old Baldur's Gate, because there's so much to think about here. I was never a D&D player. And I was like, what? I was like, why is my sword not killing this thing? And why can they beat me so easy? I just don't understand what's going on. So I was like, I don't know if I'm going to enjoy this at all. And then eventually it went on sale on PS4, and I think it was during the first lockdown during the pandemic.
Yeah.
I was like, what else am I going to do? Right? I'm sat indoors. So I bought it. I distinctly remember in fact, I think the thing that got me, I was like, okay, this is something. It was, obviously, I want to have fuck with you. So I had no idea. I was like,
classic scene.
Yeah. I mean, we all know it now. I was like, I don't know what are these skills? What's going on? I had no idea what was going on. I had no idea what Half-Life was, for example. And you play. And I always liked the investigative side of something like Broken Sword, where you're trying to figure out through speaking to people what to do next. So it was getting So I guess I had a head start there. I was kind of like, oh yeah, this is the kind of thing I'm into. And then the moment you walk out of the Whirling in Rags and you hear those horns and there's a little zoom out, I was like, wow. I thought, wow, this is
what a world they've built.
Yeah, I thought this is it. So yeah, my first playthrough, I think like most people, I spent a lot of it confused, to be honest. And I think that's the joy of it the first time you play it through. I've done this game now with maximum stats in more ways than you can conceive. So I've seen everything so many times now, and I think sometimes I'm guilty of losing sight of that magic from the beginning. But yeah, just the first playthrough was just confusing. Like how many posts are on Reddit now saying, I don't know what I'm doing, please help.
Totally, yeah. But I think what I say to new players is that they need to embrace the confusion, because the protagonist is very confused. You are supposed to be confused, and you should not, think about the game and how you play the game, but act in character, so to say. So
yeah, people are so used to scoring high score. What I need to be the best.
Yeah. And I did not take that serious. I think in my first playthrough, I just thought, okay, how do I get past this measurehead guy? Like, there needs to be some kind of mechanism that lets me get past him. And then I learned his advanced race theory and was like, all right, that's kind of what I have to do. And I underestimated how strong the RPG effect in this game is, because then I went back and everyone was like, what the fuck, are you a racist now? And I'm like, no, I just learned that to get past measurehead.
yeah, I'm just completing the task you told me to do. And this is so Hotline Miami and The Last of Us Part 2. And I've done these similar kind of things where you are just going along murdering people because the game is telling you to. And Disco Elysium does it in a way more advanced way. It goes, you're a racist now because you decided you need to get past an objective. So
exactly,
thanks.
Yeah.
Well done. Okay, so I've got some semi-quickfire questions. We may have covered some of this because we've been talking a little bit. How would you sell the idea of Disco Elysium to somebody who has never played it?
I still have problems with that. I don't know. Friends ask me, or I want to tell friends about Disco Elysium, and I'm like, oh, I like a detective RPG, but of course it doesn't capture that. So instead, what I do is that I just praise the game. Oh, it's a detective game, but you don't have to care so much about it. It just has great writing, great universe, world building, and it's so good. Just take my word for it, okay? And I think because I don't know how to recommend the game. That's why I made the videos, because I felt like, okay, this is great. I want to share this experience of, joy and just being so fascinated by the game with other people. How do I do it? I can't really do it verbally, so I'm just gonna put together the coolest stuff that I could find and put it online so I can send it to people. How do you do it? If you need to make one of your friends play Disco Elysium?
Well, I don't have any friends, so that's the first. No, people have asked me before, because generally, actually, what happens is I say, "Oh, I've got a YouTube channel," and then they say, "What YouTube channel?" I say, "Oh." Generally, my answer is, "Oh, you wouldn't like it. It's too much to explain. Like, yeah, it's just too much to explain. Look it up. It's Disco Elysium. It's like a cult hit or whatever." But my kids ask me, and they say, "Oh, it's a very silly game about a man who got a bit too drunk one day, and he couldn't remember anything. And you've got to piece it all back together." I just generally do that because I think anyone can relate to having an incredibly horrendous hangover. So I go, imagine you've had the worst hangover of your life. You don't even know who you are anymore. And now you've got to go and figure it out. But you've also got to solve a murder. Try and just make it sound as insane and ridiculous as it is, I guess. So far, convinced absolutely no one. So there you go.
That sounds good. Like this, find your own identity, but also find the murder. And it's like obviously super difficult because the one is very bad without the other. I think that's exactly a good premise. Yeah.
You must be confusing me with the Copperpedia is one of my favourite lines in the game, because it's like, oh, you're supposed to be helping me, Bray. He's like, no, not really, to be honest.
I love it when it does that. I think it's encyclopedia, and you can ask it, "Hey, fuck you for telling me about like August the 3rd from 200 years ago. How about you help me finding something about the murder?" And encyclopedia says, "Nah, not
Yeah,
today."
exactly, yeah. Kim pulls his notebook out in obviously the field autopsy, and Encyclopedia goes, he's got an A5 Mammoth, a classic, and he goes, right, anything about my mother, my life? Nope, nothing.
What a troll.
Yeah, it's amazing. Favorite character in the game?
Joyce, because she is an objectively evil character, but the game just makes you like her, makes you love her, because whenever you confront her about, hey, aren't you like aren't you with the mega corporations who fuck over the city and also with the mercenaries and shit? She says, yeah, like that's me. I chose this life. I chose to subject Ravishal to financial colonization, and I do like my job. It's a comfy life, and you just I kind of respect that, you know.
It's
And
the
she's
Donald
just
Trump.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
the
yeah,
Donald
yeah.
Trump angle. It's like, he just says it how it is.
Totally, yeah, yeah. And she's just so I don't know. She's so dignified and intelligent, educated, and I mean, she is very nice to you. She helps you out. She gives you money. She tells you everything you know about the world, the Pale, the strike, well, nearly everything.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that
your
just made
reality
me, yeah,
lowdown.
exactly. That really made me fall in love with her. She's a great character.
And that's despite actually, Kim does kind of try to warn you a little bit about it, doesn't he? He's like, she probably already knows more
Totally,
about
yeah.
you than you think, but yet
Hmm.
you're still like, yeah, especially when you go to gossip with her, and double brilliant if you go without Kim, of course.
And that's the nice contrast to Everard, because he's like, hey, I know more about you than you know about me. I will try to fuck you over and manipulate you a little, but please play with me because in the end it will be good for you too. While Joyce is very overt with these things.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But Everard makes it very clear that you need him,
Yeah.
but he's presented in such a kind of like a completely different way, very contrasting to
Hmm.
Joyce. Okay, double-barreled question next. Your favorite skill set between the four, and what's your general go-to signature skill?
Let me think. My favorite skill set probably physique because it has both half-light and endurance, and I think they are the two that exemplify the skill system the best because the premise is like you usually have like a holistic psyche, everything kind of works together. You have like a little, stomach feeling, hormones, you have your intellect, education, you see with your eyes, you have your perception skill, and everything just works together. And you can't really differentiate between them. And Disco Elysium just fragments this, just deconstructs it. And I think you see it best with Half-Light and Endurance because they're really this tummy feel, so to say. You kind of feel something, or maybe you're angry at something, and normally that immediately gets intellectualized, and you think, oh, it can't be, I can't act like that. You don't even feel the urge before you reject it.
Yeah,
And
you
this
rationalize it.
exactly. You know already. Okay, I can't punch this guy just because he drove his car too close to mine. But this Elysium just filters all of the rest out and tells you, you know what? Deep in your guts, there is a voice that tells you to, be angry, to throw the chair around. And I really love that.
Yeah, I think Half-Light in particular, an example that I can
Hmm.
think of is exactly what you're talking about is at the tribunal.
Hmm.
Because Half-Light is there going, you need to fucking do something immediately, and no matter how much the other skills say, oh no, you can talk your way out of this, or your logic says, no, don't worry, it's okay. That's your brain exactly as you say, going through the rationalization of what your gut is saying. No, there's guns everywhere. This is
Mm-hmm.
dangerous. Get the fuck out of here, or do something.
Totally. And Endurance, I think, does a similar thing on the political level, or on the, I would say, level of worldview, because it's the fascist skill, right? And the
Stoic
misogynist skill.
truths.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. So Endurance is the one that, when you think about how Harry's ex broke up with him, he tells you, you know what, women, they're all shit. They're like literal demons. They will always fuck you over. You should never do anything with them ever again. Like, whoa, okay. And then comes, I don't know, like logic or rhetoric, and they tell you, you know what, it's probably not that bad. You should just be normal about it and go on with your life. This is very stupid what Endurance say and what it says. And of course, it is stupid. It is your gut feeling. It is not intelligent. Yeah.
Yeah. I had a conspiracy theorist friend who I used to live with, and he always used to tell me he relied only on his gut, which tells you all you need to know
Yeah.
about conspiracy theorists. I just to add, without elaborating too much, my favourite is Esprit de Corps, and I would go Psyche. I'm big into the Psyche stuff. I love all the Inland Empire, just the way it describes things, and just it's your imagination, or and Esprit tells so many cool stories.
Yes,
Like you're not
yes.
expecting. All of a sudden you're in this different part. It's really, really cool. Okay, favorite piece of music from the OST.
I have to go with the Joyce theme. I think it's the Insulindian Miracle or something it's called. That this very slow and like magical, mysterious choir theme, very relatively minimalistic. And I remember I remember it playing on my first day of my very first playthrough. I said goodnight to Kim and got back to her because she didn't want to talk to me about the Pale while Kim was there, because Kim didn't want to hear it. And then there was this very just long session about her talking about like the coolest part of world building that I might have heard ever. And it's so mysterious and dark, and she trusts me with these secrets, and in the background you hear the soundtrack, and it's so dark and beautiful. It was maybe my favorite moment in the entire game, just standing there with Joyce in the night on her boat. It was very magical.
I'm getting that sense based on what you've created on your channel and Joyce being your favorite, and I'm definitely getting the sense that was a big part of the game for you, which probably leans into another question we'll ask shortly. Controversially, my favorite piece of music is the one called Zame. So
when does that play again? Is that the credit song or?
Yeah, no, the credit song's something like is it the Major Crimes Precinct 41 or something like that? Zame is the super slow, super quiet version of the. It's kind of like the main theme, or a little bit like Detective Arriving on the Scene.
Is this it?
Yeah, it's the one I did on. I'm going to like say one of my videos now. Like people will go, oh yeah, I remember that. Like it's like the biggest thing since sliced bread. But I use it on all my sad edit videos. I can't describe it. You can check it out after. It's fine. Yeah. Do you have a favorite line of dialogue in the game? I'm honouring myself, Lieutenant.
That's an all-time favorite. That's incredible. just don't, Harry. Okay. Maybe when you talk to the deserter. Now, I don't fully agree with everything the deserter says, but I think he's still very valid in being an old bitter man. And I think my favorite part of dialogue of his is when he talks about how the revolution just kind of failed. What does he say? Like the material conditions for the revolutions have vanished. The Martinez proletariat is doesn't do anything. It's just over, and you're sitting there like, whoa, like, okay, that's hard stuff there.
I think you're right actually in the profoundness of what the deserter says. And I think people, because they end up kind of associating him as the bad guy, a lot of it kind of goes, well, he's a psychopath. He's not right about anything, and all the rest of it. But
he is a psychopath, right? He is not incredibly intelligent or anything. He does say unhinged shit, and you don't have to be with it 100%. But I think the characters in Disco Elysium are similar to the skills in that they all present facets of, for example, some ideology. You have the communists, yet there you have Evra, the student communists, you have the deserter, and they're all like weird and pathetic in their own ways, but they all present like a very true aspect of what they believe in. And this bitterness, this pessimism that is part of every, I would say, serious communist, because there's not so much reason to be very optimistic. And I don't think it's good to be optimistic, because then you just repeat the mistakes of the past. And people say, hey, don't you see that Disco Elysium makes fun of him, makes fun of communists because they have this old, mad, bitter, sad, pathetic man? But no, it's a part of it. And as that, it's valid.
Yeah, and this is obviously Disco Elysium gets accused of being commie propaganda all of the time, and I do think people largely miss the point in the game in general. Is that actually, I mean, I'm repeating what people have always retort to that kind of accusation against the game. It treats all ideologies equally, and I think it's actually just about ideology in general and the dangers of ideology. As you rightly point out, these people speak about their beliefs as fact, and they talk about it, in detail, because that's what ideology is. It's something you truly believe in, and that's the whole point, is that they have their strengths and their weaknesses, and you can't just treat what happens is people have an ideology and they don't realize what they're doing is projecting onto the game their own ideology and not seeing through the wood through the trees. So yeah, I think it's a great observation.
Yeah, Disco Elysium does that really well. And as you said, yeah, I too wouldn't say it's communist propaganda. I think it is definitely written by in a majority communists, and you kind of read that because you see this, these little inside jokes, leftist theory just sprinkled in here and there. But they, for a bunch of leftists, they do present the other ideologies very well, and they didn't just say, hey, this is stupid, you shouldn't engage with this, but they really try to understand what makes people an ultra-liberal. So, and I was very surprised by how convincing they said it, because they basically said, hey, it's basically a null-sum game, this economy. We will probably not get past it. There will be losers, there will be winners. Enter the competition and just try to come out on top. That's pretty much everything you can do here. And I thought, well, that's not so wrong,
Yep. As a left of centre, more centrist kind of politically minded person myself, I felt like they kicked the shit out of me, to be honest. So constantly telling me off and not making a decision either way.
Did you get the most pathetic centrist achievement?
In my first playthrough, I did, because I was so scared of doing something wrong all of the time. I kept going, I'll take the easy option. I think there's even a dialogue option that says something like, I'll just take this one, that means I don't have to sway one way or the other. Now it is, following on from what we just talked about, the big one. I've made it clear I'm a moralist in real life. Communism, liberalism, moralism, or fascism, Danny?
I would still describe myself as a communist. So in my first playthrough, I played the communist questline, and I really, really liked it. A lot of fun, lots of inside jokes, a lot of being made fun of as a player. But if I had to say what's the best, or like the most well-made quest line and ideology in the game, I would say it's fascism, because everyone knows that fascism is bad. Like that's a no-brainer nowadays. But they managed to collect all these intuitive sympathies that lead you to that path. I think this very, endurance height style stomach growl where I don't even know how I can say this. It's this pseudo intuitiveness sometimes. And then you have this very contradictory dialogue where you can think as a player, well, this doesn't make a lot of sense, does it? Or sometimes rhetoric or logic come to your help and say, wait, but he's not making a lot of sense right now. You need to question that and, think about how you perceive that. So I think that makes a much more I don't know if I would call it an anti-fascist game, but it's definitely a better anti-fascism than just 40 hours of saying, hey, these right-wingers, they're really evil. You shouldn't associate with them.
Yeah, there's an interesting bit with the racist lorry driver where they kind of put it down to him not really having much of a luck with the ladies.
Yeah.
And to your point on how endurance works, with it being a gut feeling and being devoid of the logic, he hasn't had that conversation with himself where he goes, maybe it is me. He looks at the world around him and has this instinctive feeling that, wow, the system's gamed against me, type
exactly,
thing.
Yeah. And you get explicitly told by your voices in your head that it's probably a coping mechanism and there's more beyond that. But that's like level 2. But level 1, they made that very convincing. Yeah.
Yep. Well, so that's the what Kim would call the preliminary interviews done with. We already touched on how your journey started with YouTube and why you kind of put the videos out there that you have. I think I would just like people to have a little bit of an insight into, because YouTube is hard. I think people need to understand that this it's a tough old gig, and it can be really rewarding, and it can also be pretty cruel. So tell us how you go from an inception of an idea and where you get to the point where, the final product. Because I think your editing is absolutely outstanding. I think the way that you put together particularly your video essay videos are fantastic. I look at it with a lot of admiration. So yeah, if you just share some of your creative process.
So all of my bigger videos were born from like a small urge to communicate about stuff that I just thought about and I wanted people to know. For example, the portrait video. I think it was a Reddit post that I saw that says, hey, this like white space between Kim kind of looks like a halo, doesn't it? Then there were a lot of comments saying, oh yeah, and I also noticed that and this, and I commented myself and made like a small list of saying, oh, and Eddie Doom Spiral looks really, like an alcoholic. They really made that convincing. And then I typed like 10 lines and I deleted it and thought, wait, I should just make this into a short just to, have it all together and communicate it. And then I started writing this, 60-second short. And when I was finished, it wasn't 1 minute, but 15 minutes. And I think that's how most of the videos go, the lore video. I think that one started when I started reading the book. And I thought, I kind of have like the key to this big universe, all this lore, and I do want to write about it, to communicate to people. I want to chat with people who have read it too. And so I thought, okay, I'm gonna just make it into a video. I have done that at that point, but I'm gonna try. And I think what inspired me for that lore video in particular was, I don't know if you know the channel. He's pretty famous these days. These Fatih Vidya, I think. He makes Dark Souls and Elden Ring lore videos.
Doesn't ring a bell now.
He's a very big YouTuber. And these Dark Souls games, what's funny about them is that you can play them just focused on gameplay and, fighting bosses. And at the end, you don't really know what happened to you. You just had a fun time and you don't really know about the lore. And then you watch his videos and you're like, God, that's who I fought. That's what the game is about. And I wanted to do that about Disco Elysium because so much meaning, dialogue, world building is hidden behind, well, first of all, the book, then different dialogue lines that you may not have gone into, different skills that you did not level. And so I felt like I had this information and I wanted to share it to others. And that's when I started writing that video.
Amazing. I guess I have to confess I'm terrible at Souls games, which is probably why I've not heard of who you're talking about. I tried Bloodborne once, and I lasted about an hour. I was like, I'm just rubbish at this game. Now that's really fascinating, actually. So it's just a little seed, isn't it, which turns into a tree, and then before you know it, you've got a full-on video. So, what would be your advice to anyone starting a YouTube channel today?
So when I started making my first YouTube videos, I from time to time looked at Reddit and searched in these YouTube, like new YouTuber subreddits where people ask questions. I asked my own questions back then because I was, paranoid about the algorithm and stuff. And I still see posts from there from time to time. And it's often people who ask, hey, I want to start a YouTube channel. What should I do? Do you have any ideas about what I could do? And I always think, hey, you're kind of putting the cart in front of the horse. You have to have something, and you need to feel the urge to make a YouTube channel about it. You need to have something in the first place, be it a fascination with something. Maybe you're very educated in a topic, maybe you are a very player of a video game, maybe you're just very funny, maybe you have a certain skill. And I think when you have something like that makes people think, oh, wow, this human being is very good at that thing, better than the average human being, then I think you can put stuff out there and show it. I think that's probably what I would suggest to people who want to make a YouTube channel.
Agreed. And I think... So if I talk a little bit from my experience, I was probably one of the people you talk about on Reddit. Well, actually, I tell you what, I was, and this is something I see a lot, where people say, well, I'm playing games anyway, so I just thought I'd record it.
Mm-hmm.
No one wants to watch that. Everybody else is already playing games. Right, you're just...
I think there was a time when that worked, like
absolutely.
Back in the, late 2010s, when you start a Twitch stream, and if you were just consistent, you now have like 20k views, but that time was over, yeah.
Yeah, and I think like there's people like Jacksepticeye, I think, is a good example of someone who caught it at the right moment, because he was just playing his games, and it just happened to be at the right time. I think some people probably benefited from the pandemic, because obviously lots of people were sat indoors then. But yeah, I had a splash of all kinds of games, and it was only then when I was like, actually, I wonder if I could do... I remember I was playing Disco Elysium, and I was like, I wonder how different it would be if I had a full Psyche build, and then I did another one with a full Motrix build, and then I put the two videos together and then see what the differences are. So it was very kind of cobbled together, wasn't quite... It was a seed of an idea. And then people...
I think that's why I watch your videos, when I think, oh, I wonder how that is. I never play this kind of playthrough. I wonder what the experience of someone is who does that, what happens.
Yeah.
Because that's not something that I can, replicate on a whim. Doing the whatever quest line with maxed stats, that's gonna cost me like 5 hours, and, I need to go into the save file and everything. So I'm just gonna see, okay, how is 41st Precinct David doing that?
Thank you. Yeah, it was only then that people were like, oh, I really like this Disco Elysium stuff. I was like, right, I'm going to go even further here, and then here we are. Okie dokie, right. So let's talk about some of your specific content. Obviously, there's quite a few videos on this. We're not going to cover them all, but we'll cover the ones which I think are... I mean, we could talk about your streamer series, for example, which are insanely popular.
Insane! I never expected that. Yeah,
it's great. It's honestly, I remember when you first put up I think I came to your channel by the time the first one was up, but then I remember you put the second up, and I was like, how is he doing that? Like, this is witchcraft. Like, what's going on? But I'd like to talk really more about the more kind of essay stuff, because I think that's really where we get inside your brain when we watch those videos. So, Sacred and Terrible Air. The video is titled "What is the Pale? We Got the Book," I believe.
Yeah. Oh, I think "What is the Pale" is the thumbnail, and the title is just "The Law of Disco Elysium," and then "We Got the Book."
Yes, very, very clever. This is hands down my favourite video of yours. I've watched it multiple times.
Thanks.
And I especially watched it another 5 or 6 times before recording this because I wanted to make sure I didn't come in as an idiot.
I only rewatched it once, so now you know it better than me.
Right, so maybe you should ask me the question.
I think so.
So it's obviously about the book, right? And the many themes around the pale and the innocence. Now, I think a lot of that stuff can wash over, you know, a standard playthrough, right? You're not really paying too much attention, and actually you might completely miss stuff about the pale and the innocence, right? So first of all, I want to praise you for the incredible job you did in that video of actually aligning the relevant parts of the book with the game. I think you did an amazing job of connecting those dots. So I just want to talk a little bit about your journey from book to game to video, if you know, you can contextualize that for us.
Mm-hmm. So I think when I saw the book uploaded, the first version, I think like 2 weeks after that, the second version came out, I immediately obviously read it. I was already a big fan of Disco Elysium lore. I think I made like 2 videos about Disco Elysium before that, the streamer video and the one about the communism quest line. And I thought, okay, that's like, I now have the key to actually go into that universe to maybe make educated speculations about how the Pale works and all that stuff. And I think it was actually my fascination with these kind of lore videos that I talked to you about, these that I mainly watch about the Dark Souls series of Fatih Vidya. Amazing lore videos. I'm not on his level at just very minimal editing. He does it way better. You need to watch some of that one day. So I just thought, okay, I want to share this. I have this kind of surplus of information, and it's nice for me to know, okay, this could, you know, work together with that. That's how the Pale might work. That's how the old innocences work together, or what kind of effect they have on the current Elysium that we see in Disco Elysium. And I just wanted to write it down, I guess, and also develop my own speculation, and I have admitted that a lot of it is speculation. The whole part about the Pale, we have this fan art by Joshua. I don't quite remember his name, but it's in the video about, you know, magpies and these streams of time, and it doesn't not make sense, let me say it like that, but it's still, so it's officially commissioned art.
It's weird, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And there are definitely alternative explanations for all of that, but I needed to develop my own understanding, and I had a lot of fun doing it. And I think in the end it does match a lot of descriptions and dialogue in the game, where they talk about the Pale and how, you know, how the future and the past works, etc. So that was just part of my fascination, to really write it down for myself too, not just for other people, but I needed to process that book. I needed to process the game. I wanted to dive into it, and I thought, why not combine it with a video where I talk to other people about what I found out?
Yeah, amazing. And I think a lot of people, so I've never read the book. I relied on your video and the summary of the story which you shared on Reddit. I guess I've already said I'm not like a huge reader, and I think it scares me off a little bit, and in particular the translation issue with Estonian being such a crazy language. It's always kind of
crazy that you play the book game then.
Yeah, it's a guy. So given your experience with the book, I've often kind of theorized, and I think others have too, about the possibility of Harry being an innocent. What do you view Harry's relationship with the Pale and the Innocents? Because there's also, so there's he's got some weird otherworldly ability to see like a spree and shivers. He does have that in him, this sense of you know what's going on, and his understanding of the Pale is surprises Suna and Kim in the church. So I guess my question is twofold. Do you think he's innocent, and do you think the result of his loss of memory is down entirely to the Pale?
I do think his loss of memory has to do with the Pale. I think he did absolutely interact with that Pale hole, and I think the parts of the game that really point towards that is when he just knows far too much about it. You can talk with Sona, the programmer in the church, and you can actually have a very elaborate theory on, the 2 millimeter Pale hole, and you can be the one who comes up with that theory in the first place before her, and it turns out to be true. So I imagine that Harry was definitely in that church. He, looked around. He had some kind of anthroponetic knowledge, I would say. Maybe he was hobbyist
I don't know.
Pale scientist.
Let's go with. So I just want to remark quickly on the fact that to add to that, if you pursue the conversation with Joyce when she's at the fishing village, you have one last opportunity to speak to her, and that's when she says, "You're radiated. You're very sick with radiation, just like I am."
Oh,
yeah.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, you get one last chance to speak to her before you go back for the. Is it after you? I think if you do the shivers check at the failed electrical, but you don't go and see Ruby, and you go and speak to Joyce instead, you can speak to her about the fact that you are. So she talks about her experience with the Pale and how she's suffering from the same radiation. Says that Harry's sick. And then you can also, on the back of that, you can send her away with it to go and make a decision with Wild Pines as to what to do in response to the strike. And then Everard says, "Oh, it's all part of my plan." So I've digressed slightly there, but I thought it was just worth remarking.
Classic Everard.
Yeah, exactly. The thing is about Everard, he never actually, for any second, says he's anything other than what he is, right? He's very clear. This is exactly what it is, and that's that. So we don't think he's an innocent. I think it's documented in the book. So the book is after the game, right? And there is another innocent that comes after the game, correct? Is he the guy? He's the one. He's the one that wants to infect people with nihilism.
Yeah, the innocent Ambrosio San Miro definitely plays a part of it. Yeah, exactly. And he's around. He's some kind of nihilist, like wants to sink the world into the Pale. Probably has to do with the atomic strike on Revachol too. I don't know for sure, but it's definitely an army from the place where he was the official innocent, as far as I remember. So he definitely played a part in that, which, yeah, I'm not sure how to take it. Maybe metaphorically, the nihilism, this kind of historic pessimism, brings the Pale in the end, just like it was supposed to do in Disco Elysium, but now it has some kind of personification. But since the Innocences are kind of the personifications of the world spirit, their moment of reign, he might be the personification of simply the progress of Pale and the downfall of humanity.
Yep, great observation. Does it then mean that Cop of the Apocalypse is the true canon, Harry?
I think the Apocalypse is canonical. Like, you already are at kind of the in a pre-apocalyptic setting, both with the general progression of the Pale and then also the nuke on Revachol that we read about in the book. Although we not 100% know if nuke, we just have some scenes where all of a sudden all contacts are silent with Revachol, and some news reports that it has been nuked, but I think that's a 90% certainty. Now, the Cop of the Apocalypse, that's an interesting thing because Half-Light tells you that it's cope. Like, no matter how much you are the prophet of the apocalypse, no matter how much you double down on your apocalyptic visions and tell everyone that the end is coming, he tells you, hey, like, that's kind of stupid, right?
Yeah.
So I thought about that, and I'm not quite sure how it works because, of course, it's ironic. The world is objectively going to a very unpleasant end. The circumstances are not very great in Revachol. The Pale is progressing, and Terry's life itself is not very pleasant either. And then at that moment, you fully embrace that it's gonna completely end very soon in a big, in a big darkness. And part of that, I think, is Harry like projecting his own suicidal ideation into the world and have it be some kind of metaphor for his own, own being, for his own psyche that is also flirting with the end of all things,
Kind of like
with the end of his life.
Yeah, it's kind of like, well, the world's going to end anyway, so fuck does it matter?
Yeah, exactly. And I think I talked to a friend of mine actually who studies psychology, and she talked to me about how like predicting the worst outcome gives you a kind of like fake power over it because you're not caught on the wrong foot by it. You already know what's gonna happen, so it's not gonna have a big effect on you. And like she told me about people who always think that their partner will break up with them, and when it does, they're not too surprised. They take it relatively well. It's obviously still not a good thing to assume all the time, but that's kind of how it works. You have some imaginary power of what's happening to you. Yeah, it's really interesting, this whole apocalypse thing. Like you can see it as, a real thing, as the political future of Revachol, which is some kind of, city at the end of the world. It's kind of like socioeconomically pre-apocalyptic, I would say. And then it's also really pre-apocalyptic because of the Pale. And then you have this harbinger of doom, the apocalypse cop, who has, some kind of actual predictive power because he has, been in contact with the Pale and has been filled with all kinds of information that he couldn't have. And he's also talking about the Pale. So I don't really have an answer about what it really means, how it, how we should talk about it, but it's at least very different, very interesting that this escape fantasy is apocalypse. Yeah.
Yeah, and like you've already remarked, it's all speculation, right? I don't think anyone beyond the writers could really tell us what it all means. Okay, so the Ravers believe in the power of hardcore and the innocent's perikinesis. I can't remember how to pronounce that. By contrast, they despise Dolores Day and the human. Well, Noid in particular despises the ideology of humanism. What are your thoughts on why they? I mean, the innocent perikinesis seems to be similarly aiming to have a positive influence on the world, and they see Dolores Day, who is seen to be the golden age of the world, as an evil warmonger. So, what are your thoughts on that, and why they come to that conclusion?
So at some point they are contrarians, I think. They absolutely need to hate the thing that everyone else loves, the counterculture, counterculture people.
Yeah.
But they're also anarchists. And the reign of Dolores Day it always reminds me of how the people see, our real life empires. They're, the personification of good. And once you look into what they actually did, you see, okay, they bombed like 3 countries in the third world and talks about that. And that's Dolores Day for me. It's kind of like, there are definitely analogies to be made, kind of, yeah. So they're the So the ravers are the kind of people who say, you know what, just think one more time about how history really works. At the end, I don't really know what they're about, why they are so drawn to Pericarnassus, because we don't know too much about him. We know that he's, the first uh, pale scientist, so to say, and that he is a big figure of mythology and this very abstract notion of love that they also pursue. The love of hardcore, the love of the world, the love of oneself, love of the moment that you're in, and for some reason that seems to expel the pale in the book and the game. But everything I can say about how that exactly works is definitely speculation.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I think you hit the nail on the head there. I actually hadn't thought about that. That's the typical centrist in me, you see. Never wanting real change.
They're really the anti-centrists of the game, maybe more than most others.
Yeah. Inframaterialism, right? To me, that seemed to be the most purposely ridiculous communist ideology, right? And I guess it still is, but actually, in context of what we think the pale is, and things like the super deep and everything passing through and turning into a kind of plasm, does it not make it the most important ideology as a result?
Well, yes, it is. It is the most absurd and the most important, as you said, the most absurd teaching. But for some reason, it's weirdly canonical. I mean, you can manifest this plasm to keep the Matchbox Tower from falling at the end of the Communist Quest, and you also have the, so to say, opposite. I'm not really sure how to say it, of inframaterialism at play when you talk to the light bending super rich guy who also has basically magic going on, but based on the material level of wealth, so to say. So there definitely is a really extra physical magical moment going on. And now, is it really the belief in communism that does it? Maybe that's far too specific, and it's more like the ravers do it, a love and optimism for the moment you're in, for life, for the future. Maybe it's a general optimism that is, in the case of the communist, so to say, mediated through a political project. That might very well be.
Yep.
Yeah, so it is the effects, I would say, of inframaterialism are canonical. Inframaterialism itself, like Ignaz Nielsen teaches it, I'm not so sure.
Yeah, it's funny how they make the absurd so important and in the end logical in Elysium. It's amazing. So just one more on the apocalypse and the book in general. I couldn't help but feel that. So when you speak to Clashier about Larator, I'd just like to know what your thoughts are on where that sits in with the impending apocalypse. And there's a theory around a possible revolution going to happen. I just wonder where you see that lining up.
So Laritou, I always thought about it in political terms, and I think it's first of all meant in political terms. Clasier talks about it, and the artist girl also does this floor graffiti. One day I'll return to your side.
There's lots of people who kind of got a sense of it coming, right?
Yeah, exactly. And at the end of the game, your favorite skill, Esprit du Corps, also tells you about your bosses kind of plotting something. You don't really know what it's gonna do. Something, is it a communist project, or is it just general autonomy of Revachol from moral intern or something? We don't really know, but I thought about it for a bit, and now you need to paste this conspiracy guy meme on top of puts the
the guy doing all
stickers together.
Yeah.
Exactly. But I thought about this DeLorean concept, after life, death, after death, life, after the world, the pale, after the pale, the world, and then and also Half-Light part where he speaks in Greek about palindropos, which is
Yeah.
like a return.
Ta'ola.
And then exactly, yeah. And then I thought, okay, this kind of returning trope and, this cyclical motion is just so prevalent. Is it really just a reference to politics when you speak about la retour? And then I thought, okay, how does it have to do with this DeLoreanism of after the pale, the world, after the world, the pale? And I thought about what if we interpret it in a kind of, metaphysical way or cosmological way, where it's really a statement about the how the world would be developed into pale, and at some point it will rebirth itself again, and the cycle begins anew unless someone breaks it someday and effectively wards off the pale. And that's
It's sort of like Elysium's version of our 7 extinctions or whatever it is that we've had on planet Earth, right?
kind of, yeah. And also, of course, our potential current extinction event, climate change, which is also something that might fuck us all over, but humanity will survive and it will restart, and then we have the task of doing it better the next time.
Yeah.
And
although there might not be anyone left to it might be another round of dinosaurs, I reckon, if we fuck this one up.
Who knows? Yeah.
One of my favourite quotes from Einstein is, I know not what weapons World War III will be fought, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones.
Exactly. Yeah. Who knows? But I do think some stupid rich people will survive in their bunkers or something. I think that will happen.
Sadly, it'll be Elon Musk and Bezos, and they'll be left to just for
I think
the world
birth by their offspring will definitely directly plunge us into the next world war, just straight up again.
Yeah, you just be an endless cycle of world wars.
But when you talked about the ground graffiti, one day I will return to your side, I think that might also be a reference to the Pale, because the Pale is, so to say, like the past, and when you go into the Pale, you do return, or your past returns to you. Harry's ex might, magically not really return to him when he enters the Pale and is overcome by melancholia. The better days of Revachol might come back when you enter the Pale, where time and space kind of gets tumbled around, and you're suddenly in contact with the past. So there's a lot of speculation to be done, I would say.
Yeah, I always I had a theory at one point that Harry had been pursuing the memory of Dora. Is it the motorway south that the Pale driver describes? So this is the road that goes through the Pale, where all the trucks need to transport stuff, etc. And I kind of theorized that he'd been driving down the motorway south, just trying to restore some sort of memory of Dora.
Totally. Either that, or he just basically stuck his head into the Pale hole in the church to see if it does something.
Yes. God, I get so sad about Dolores Day. Thank you for that. That's really, really cool. We've already touched a little bit on the portraits and some of your insights into how it come about. Obviously, there's community activity on this exists out there already. I'm just curious. I mean, you've remarked on it a little bit already in some of the inspiration you took from what people were pointing out on social media. You do reference in the video that you're not someone who's particularly artistically inclined or knows, professionally what they're looking at. And you're quite honest and upfront about the references to the art team and some of the stuff from the art book. So I just wonder how much of the observations were just you kind of making your own observations and going through the various portraits.
A lot of it was just free associations. I saw a few mentions in the art book about, for example, I think Sylvie is her name. She worked at the Whirling and Rags, and you kind of scared her away. And I took that, but a lot of it, I think it talks about Idiot Doom Spiral 2 in the book. And then I thought, hey, I kind of thought a very similar thing. What a great feeling to be confirmed by the artist. But a lot of it is just spitballing, which is, obviously not a scientific way of doing anything, but when it comes to art, it obviously plays with your inner intuitive metaphors and what you associate with things. When I see, I don't know, the portrait of Measurehead and kind of flash behind him, I see this, like, it makes him bigger than he is. It's some kind of authority behind him, and that's what I talk about it then. Or who else was there? Yeah.
I particularly liked the one you pointed out, the archetypes, and how I thought that was absolutely amazing. Actually, the way that you looked at the archetypes. So you made the comparison between the intelligent type Harry. He's got his own halo. He's kind of protected by, and this also links into what you talk about with, the gut instincts and how you are protected by the absurdity of your gut instincts, because he's got his protection of his intelligence, saying, actually, these silly things that you're feeling can be rationalized if you just, stay within this bubble and you'll be fine. Similarly, the sensitive cop is kind of out in the world and, taking it all in, and is just a complete free spirit. And then, of course, there's the physical, where he's driving himself into the world, and he's he is impressing himself on the world.
Yeah, they're amazing visualizations of the different play styles.
Yeah, absolutely incredible. And I just want to take a moment actually to say that Disco Elysium is actually an artistic tour de force. And I think I'm not saying anything profound here by pointing it out, but I just honestly, from every inch of this game, it's just beautifully presented. I don't think there is nothing like it. And when people ask about disco likes, you can only take certain facets of it because it's a sum of all its parts, right? And you can draw certain parts of Disco Elysium from other games, but there really isn't anything like it.
Totally, yeah. I also get asked for, disco-like games, and sure, there are a few games that are just very good, that have different, that share different aspects of Disco Elysium. But I mean, the only disco-like game we will get might be someday the next project of the Zaum members, the old ones. Who knows?
Yeah, I wonder. That does. So I'll just ask you one more question on this, because we have talked a little bit about the portrait stuff already, so I don't want to dwell on it too much and cover the ground we've already covered. But were there any portraits in particular which are your favourites?
I do love the portrait of Idiot Doom Spiral, because, like, he's an alcoholic. I've seen alcoholics in my real life, and they're all very down on their luck. They don't look very healthy. Idiot Doom Spiral doesn't look healthy either. But they also have this kind of superficial brightness. They tell you, like, really crazy stories. They say some somewhat intelligent things, and you then wonder, wow, is this is a bright mind, so to say. And
high concept mind.
yeah. So it's kind of, you see the degradation of, his body, his spirit, but then also something that still resists, that is still there. You see the colors, you see his vivid imagination, you see the eyes that still have soul in it.
Yeah.
And it matches his character, because this Idiot Doom Spiral is a person who is, like, visibly a maybe late stage alcoholic who is physically degrading, but he is always showing off some things. His great career from before, his great tracksuit that is a little dirty but otherwise really fucking great, his stories that he loves to tell, and his achievements, and he's so proud. And you think that's some kind of overcompensation. That's cope, but
yeah,
that's how alcoholics often work. And I think the portrait really captures that, like
I love that
dissolution,
guy.
Yeah,
I absolutely love that guy. If you go, and if anyone hasn't done it, the Ultra Liberal Political Vision Quest is incredible. It's really,
I have
really
not
funny.
played it yet. I will do it.
Oh, have you not? Oh, you need to do that, my friend, because Idiot Doom Spiral is pretty prominent in that. You'll love that. So I won't spoil it. I was going to spoil something then, but I won't. You need to go and play that.
All right. Will do.
Or you could go and watch my extensive ultra liberal political vision quest video. It's up to you.
I might do that.
No, go and experience it for yourself. Honestly, it's really, really funny. Okay, let's talk a little bit about.
Do you have a favorite portrait? I need to ask you that.
Do I have a favorite portrait? Do you know, I hadn't thought about it. I didn't think you'd flip it around on me, to be honest. Fascist Harry.
Good one. Yeah, I love him too.
I love the conception of it, how it comes about, and then I love the response to when you first speak to Kim. And it's actually, are you aware of Nigel Farage in the UK? He's a right wing.
Yeah.
He's obviously been in the news quite a bit recently because we've having a bit of trouble with right-wing people expressing their views in the country.
I've heard so, yeah.
And he's popping up on TV quite a bit, and he's incredibly right-wing, and it's just made the Fascist Harry portrait even funnier to me now, because now I look at him and I go, yeah, actually, they do look pretty constipated, don't they? there is something going on there. Yeah, yeah, it's really, really funny. I loved Kim's reaction to it, and then you're just walking around with this ridiculous look on your face for the rest of the game, with the Gary, the crypto fascist the son behind you. So yeah, I'd go with Fascist Harry for me.
I love that moment. He becomes, a little more dignified. He becomes a bit well groomed. He combs his hair, his beard. He just loses his expression, becomes a little more dignified, but so much more sad. And I think the normal Harry, the grinning expression Harry, is a freak, but when you see him on the street, you're like, oh, that could be a funny dude. The fascist Harry is just he's in deep waters somehow. You don't really want to interact with him.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny. You don't see many people cosplaying that particular version of Harry either. It's always sideburns and absurdity. I guess they're worried about the reaction they might get, but...
But I love it aesthetically too. Like the flag, I'm sorry, the Revachol flag looks really good as a background. It's good design.
Or Revachol if we're going to be fascist about it.
Right.
Yeah.
That's true, Bröter.
Yeah. Yes, amazing. And obviously it comes with anal beads as well. Gary's got a nice collection of them. So thank you for that. I think we have to talk about your video on the PMG documentary, Not Very Disco. Any credible Disco Elysium essayist has formed an opinion on this, and I think yours was a pretty fair assessment of some of the other assessments that were done. You point towards, is it Stushy? Apologies to Stushy if I got that wrong, who did a similar video in response to PMG's documentary.
Yes. I don't know her name right now. You might.
I think it's Stushy. Yeah,
but the link is in the video.
Yeah. So I don't think we'll really solve any, the burning questions about it. But I just wonder where your feelings are on what the future holds for any sequel. We kind of alluded to our hopes for it. We obviously don't know anything really about the court case or whatever that's going on to sort that stuff out legally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so where do you think we could potentially see Disco Elysium and its people in a year's time?
I do not know. You were the one who messaged me about co-founding a new company or maybe registering something that, always gives me a little hope. Right now, people message me and ask me, hey, like, do you know anything? Can we support them in some way? And I always tell them no. Like, if they need your support in any way, they will go public and they will say, hey, wishlist our game or put $5 into our crowdfunding or whatever. I think what people can do right now is just leave them in peace and not overfill their DMs with the 100th message about, hey, what's going on? How is the lawsuit going? How's the new game going? I do trust Kovitz and co. I think they all have a good head on their shoulders, and they will figure it out. And I mean, in the very, very worst case, they lose the IP. and they do a new game with, outside of the universe of Elysium, probably.
Yep.
But it will be good too. Like, it might be a little later than just continued Disco Elysium 2, obviously. But I do trust them.
Yeah, so you touched on Red Info. So Red Info, for people not aware, is a company founded by what looks like Robert Kurvitz with a couple of other players. Helen Hinpair is listed as I made the mistake of saying she was a director on a Reddit post about this. I don't think she's a director. She's named as a stakeholder. I don't know what they call it, but they have to post filings to the UK government on the status of the company on a regular basis. The most recent,
you can do some local research, investigative research,
because they're based
going into the archives.
They are based in Brighton, or the company is registered in Brighton. And the most recent update to the UK government on its status was confirmed on the 10th of July of this year. So it's not dead, and it's not, well, for what we don't know what they're doing. It's incredibly quiet on that front, and I would put that down to the fact that the people listed as associated with Red Info are there's a guy called Sander Tal, who I don't know who that is, but there's some kind of corporate advisor. There is a corporate link to China, I believe. Robert Kurvitz is obviously listed on there. There's no Alexander Rostov, and there's speculation that that's a pseudonym. So he could possibly be Sander Tal. I don't know. Can I say this? I'm going to say this. I spoke to Robert Kurvitz on Instagram, praising him for obviously the work he did, and I said, I hope one day you do something. This doesn't mean anything, really. He said, mayhaps.
All right, that's not too bad.
Which is better than absolutely not. It's not quite, it's coming out next week. Mayhaps gives me hope, because there's at least something there, right? And to your point, actually, about, supporting them and I have to hold my hands up here, and I'm finding it incredibly... So I'm reaching out to these people at the moment for people obviously aware of the podcast and what I've been saying on Twitter, and I've had some good responses so far, and I really hope that this can kickstart some sort of spark in the world of Elysium. I really do. But I'm very conscious that this is so sensitive for some people. People had a really bad time at Zone. Some people have said to me, like, I really don't want to talk about it. It's a lot of bad stuff happened in that time that I'm not comfortable going over again, because they found peace, right? And I totally get that. And everybody,
totally.
Everybody who comes back to me, I completely appreciate their position, and I don't want to bother people, right? Because they're human beings at the end of the day, and I don't want to drag up stuff. Like, there's obviously, you mentioned in the documentary that some people had to go through things like therapy, and there was lots of burnout through crunch and all the rest of it. So I'm very, very conscious that I am, by messaging them, possibly dragging that back up. So that's a public apology to those of you I'm messaging at the moment if I'm causing you any grief.
I think they do appreciate your messages.
Yeah, honestly, the people have been lovely, so I can't fault it. Okay, community questions time, which means we're getting towards the end. This is the last section. Some of these questions are very silly.
I have not read any of them. I
good.
did not look at them.
Good. So some of them are aimed at both of us. Some are specific to me, some are specific to you. Jamrock, you look so good. What is your bench press PB?
That was obviously not my...
And people can now see how good they are and estimate your bench press PB anyway, I think.
Definitely not posted by my alt account. No.
That was very funny. Thank you for that. I like Jamrock Hobo's profile picture. I'm a blonde Jean Truther. Not a question, just letting you know how much of a fan they are. I said to you actually in the chat, I think it's really funny now that you are basically the man in sunglasses. And I think when you were streaming the online dating, the dating scene with Kim, the first thing I said to you was, I can't believe you're not really a man in a wig. with some sunglasses on. So it's quite
I'm
cool.
gonna do a cosplay one day with a long blonde hairs and sunglasses. I think that's good.
Oh,
But I choose the John Wick Mayer picture because it's a disguise, and I mean, the profile picture is a disguise for me, so I thought that matches.
See, you're just thoughtful on a level that I'm not. In fact, so my first ever logo for the 41st Precinct there was a weird concept art of the police together from the 41st Precinct. And I just
yeah.
And all I ever got was, who the fuck are these guys? I was like, yeah, maybe I need to make this a little bit more obvious to Disco Elysium. So I just went with Harry and Kim.
I also thought about one of the student communists, but most players didn't even get to that part.
Exactly.
And John Wick Mayer is just way more known.
Yeah. Do you think a fan-made sequel, like in Fallout and Undertale fandoms, would be a good idea that people would be on board with? Why not? I mean, it's been something that I think I've kind of hoped would happen in various guises. So there's a game called Esoteric Ebb in development at the moment, which draws very heavily on Disco Elysium, and I think that's probably as close as you're going to get to spiritual successors, right? So I don't see why not.
I think I saw a bit of that. Yeah. I think I think if you are capable of making something like Disco Elysium, you should have the confidence to do something else, because it means you are creative, you know how to make a game, you know how to write, and that means you are able to make a world, to create your own game mechanics. So if you want to make something very, very close to Disco Elysium, I would never discourage you. I would probably play it immediately and on stream, post a review on YouTube, Twitter, or whatever. But I think when people ask me for Disco Elysium likes, I always say what people need is not a game like Disco Elysium. It's a game as good as Disco Elysium. I think that's what most people want. They ask for a Disco Elysium like after they play Disco Elysium. So I think make a good game.
Yeah, exactly. I think you've hit the nail on the head. A camel is a horse made by a committee, right? And if you have a single idea that you love and you want to do it, you do that. Don't then draw from... I mean, you could draw inspiration, but don't then try to just create something that already exists. Put your own stamp on the world.
Yeah, because I think, hey, you can do even more than that.
Yeah, I wouldn't reject it, though. I would definitely check it out.
No, obviously not.
So this was less of a question. I've just included these because some of them were really nice. Okay, so I'm very thankful for your 8 minutes of Volition video. It's a quick and easy way to reorient myself when things are getting bad again. So I think you probably hear that a lot, right?
That's very lovely. Thank you, the commenter.
This is really funny. I think we've already kind of answered it, to be honest. Jamrock, you look so good. I wanted to ask you if you think that the Disco Elysium universe will continue to exist and expand through fans in some kind of non-canon canon. Kind of covered that bit already. Or are we doomed to see what Amazon and big capitalism do with the brand?
Maybe both. Maybe there will be a made by a corporation, by Amazon and the current Zaum without the OG Zaum Cultural Association. I think that would actually be kind of funny.
Yeah, but it would be amazing. Amazon. So there's always talk about Amazon owning the TV rights, but I don't think there's too much in that. They bought up a lot of licenses.
They do that quite often. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't think there's too much to read into that. I mean, the only thing we've really seen come out of those license purchases, to my knowledge anyway, is The Boys, Fallout, the Lord of the Rings thing. There's probably some I'm missing, but those are the ones that spring to mind. And those have obviously got really big reach in the first place.
Oh, yeah.
Now, this question is probably my favourite of the lot because I've asked it of myself. How long can you keep up the Disco Elysium content until there is no more game for you to cover? It's already awesome that you've made such a success from a 20-hour game, but surely it has an end.
You want to go first?
Yeah, I think about this all the time. I think if you limit yourself to the boundaries of something like a 20-hour experience, as they point out, you're probably not suited to being in a creative space in the first place. I think we've proven that you can get more than just what is in the game through our content. Okay, fine, I've done a bunch of videos where it's playthroughs. That I can completely see where they come from on that, because there is only so much game that you can actually put out there. But that's why you make interesting observations, it's why you make silly meme content, and it's why you then branch it out to similar content and maybe the zeitgeist at the time, and you can draw on other things and relate it back to Disco Elysium very easily. And I think as long as you are capable of seeing that stuff, why should you ever be limited to what is in the game?
Yeah, I would absolutely echo like almost all of that. I think you cannot really think in terms of how much percentage of the game have we covered, and when then we just kind of have to stop because there's no more videos to make. I mean, when you look at YouTube and content, there are accounts with 1 million subscribers making content about Wordle. They play it with their friends and they have like millions of views. It's crazy. So you can, so to say, expand the universe of Disco Elysium by just talking about it from a perspective of this universe. For example, I want to make a video about the whole apocalypse situation. Cop of the apocalypse, what does escapism and catharsis really mean? How does relate to real world phenomena, pale climate change? What's up with that? I think that would be really interesting. I definitely want to make that.
Yep.
But I think my problem really is I also want to do some stuff that doesn't really have to do a lot with Disco Elysium. And then I ask myself, is there a place for that on a channel that is almost exclusively dedicated to the game? Like when I made, for example, a video as games in general, gaming and to whatever, gaming and labor or whatever, like I ask myself, can I post this? Can I do this on my YouTube channel? Do I need a second channel? Because I remember a Twitter post from YouTube CEO who says they are treating, or rather the algorithm treats YouTube channels like shows. People, after watching Game of Thrones Season 1, Episode 2, don't want to see True Detective. They want to see Episode 3.
Yeah.
So, and that's how it works. So I wonder if YouTube doesn't like restrict the creativity of some creators in that way. That was not an answer to the question, but something entirely else.
I think it's an interesting observation, and like you, I've thought, well, this question I have absolutely asked of myself, and I've explored the possibility of going and doing, like I've got like an edit. I was on the back of doing my True Detective edit. I was like, well, I could probably do other edits for other games, but then I don't feel as passionate. I did an Alan Wake 2 one, and I was like, I don't feel anywhere near as passionate about creating for that stuff than I do Disco Elysium. And that comes back to the question we had earlier about, when you start a YouTube channel, you've got to really care about it. Otherwise, you're not going to make content that's worthwhile, because if you don't care about what you're passionate about, then why should anyone else?
Yeah, exactly. And it's also like, it's not about covering stuff, because, for example, people ask me for the next 8 minutes of this and that skill video. When does it come out? And I say, someday. But I mean, the truth is, I really wanted to, and because I thought it was hilarious, and I did start the Half-Life thing, uploaded it, and it immediately got demonetized. And I thought, what was I thinking?
Really?
Like, of
Yeah.
course. He
Yeah.
just talks about murdering people all the time.
Yeah, it's a real kick in the teeth when stuff gets demonetized. I had to completely. I mean, not that I do it for that, but it's nice, right? Because it does take time, and sometimes it can feel a bit like I'm being paid 4 pence an hour here. So it's, it's
Yeah, exactly. And in my case, I mean, it didn't just get demonetized. It got like a, hey, are you 18? You have to be 18
oh
to watch thing. And I thought, okay, that's not gonna be a hit anyway. I'm gonna use. But what I really wanted to say is that it's not about covering. It's for me, it's about what I want to do. When I want to share a joke, share a funny scene from, a stream or whatever, when I want to share a thought on the world of Elysium or how it really world, I will make that video and always promised myself to not make videos for the channel and only make them, so to say, for myself. And ironically, that I think is good for the channel, so to say. If I don't go there in a campaign to cover everything, to do 8 minutes of every skill, to do a playthrough of every ideology, but to really just do what I think is very, very worth my time and where I have a certain enthusiasm in doing it. I think that's important because at some point, well, when you see like these big YouTubers, you immediately see the break point. Where do they make videos they are passionate about, and when do they, become a YouTuber and make videos every week to, support themselves?
yeah, it becomes
And
a
I
job.
do exactly, and I obviously do support that. I think they should be able to do that. But when I think about me, and I can be essentially transparent here for a second, the first streamer video, it is amazing. It now has like 900,000 views. It's crazy. And I got like $900 for it.
Wow,
So I
really?
thought, okay, well, if I really want to do this for a living, so to say, I would need to make like 2 or 3 of these a month, and the quality is gonna go down so much that it's gonna be just really unrealistic. So I decided for myself, I'm gonna make the videos that I'm passionate about, that I really don't care how much money they make, how many views they get,
Yeah.
and that's, I think, what's the healthiest.
So there was one for me here. Do I intend to make another video of disco-like game recommendations? Your video got me to try and love the Clan Man 2 demo, so I was wondering if you stumbled upon any recommendations since. I imagine there isn't too many yet because DE is still a relatively new game, but I'd still love to see another video in the future. Well, that was like a 2024 video. That's pretty recent anyway, that video. First of all, I'm glad it helped. I'm aware of a handful that claim to be disco likes, but I don't think there's a lot out there to inform you on them, is the short answer. There's one called Rue Valley, which I think I included in the first video, but the only thing available about that game is like he did like a lighting test which he put on Twitter. Otherwise, I think it's one guy trying to make a game. So you've got to remember that these people are on their own and they're developing these things. Game development is hard, and they take time. So not in the immediate, but if we get something maybe concrete in the next, maybe next year, I'll have a look at what's on the horizon.
I would love for that to become a regular series. Hey, here's the new media that just came out, a show, a book, whatever. And if you like Disco Elysium, you might love it.
Yeah, I think for me, it probably needs to be, as you allude to there, more than just games. And maybe consider some of the wider media that relates back to disco kind of themes and story beats.
Totally, yeah.
Do you believe Everard would build the supercenter he promised in the game? And in general, do you think he genuinely cares for the future of Martinez? Also, ignoring the collage mode pictures, those don't count.
I think Ebrard is a honest guy. In some way, I don't think he has any reason to be fake about that center.
Agreed. I think I'm not sure his motivations are for the children, and he's dishonest about the impact it's going to have on the neighborhood. But then he also kind of makes the point that change requires that sometimes. You're talking about a guy who's lived in Martinez his entire life. He's experienced. He talks about. So you can ask him why he's so fat, and he says, "Well, when I was growing up, all my mum had was bread and sugar to feed me, so that's why." So he really does come from a position of, hardship, and actually has built his way up. Okay, he might be a corrupt verm, as Joyce Messier would call him, but I do think he cares about the neighbourhood that he runs, but he wants to do it his way, which isn't necessarily always the most moral.
Yeah, I would say so too. He is Ravacholian, and he does, I think, genuinely care about the people.
Yeah.
Now, what really is the end goal of the youth center? I don't know. Maybe it even has to do with his whole drug operation. I'm not completely sure, because that, let's be real, goes against the interest of children in Ravachol, because they will have, kids doing crack behind the inn, like Kun and Kun West, like times 50 when they go on like that.
Yep.
We don't know. Yeah.
So I'm going to ask two more, unless there's any in particular that you spotted that you want to answer. I just looked through the list of questions, and most of them we've talked about already, or we touched on the point of the question. But there are two more which I think are pretty relevant to what we can have as fresh.
Mm-hmm.
So should we just go with them?
Absolutely.
So actually we probably covered this, to be honest. Which cop is the most interesting in your opinion, or what copo types do you think go well with each other? Sorry cop, communist cop, superstar cop, apocalypse cop, etc. I mean, we talked a little bit about our feelings on apocalypse cop. I guess, is there any other copo types that you're a particular fan of?
I do love the superstar cop, because he is mostly he is very unhinged, probably equally unhinged as the apocalypse cop, and you can just say the most weird stuff to people and behave like the star of the world. I think it's a really funny playthrough with the superstar cop.
Yeah, there's a line about the pigs who's obviously got your gun, and when you're hearing about this woman for the first time, he's superstar cop will say, probably just another one of my rabid fans.
Yeah. I think there's a similar interaction with the radio show when you call the DJ flares or something. But there's something, you must be so lucky to speak with me, the superstar cop.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, very, very funny. And the final question, which I actually really like, and I have got an answer for this one already. What is your most controversial disco take? Do you want me to go first while you have a think?
Yeah, go for it.
Mine is the whole staging of the lynching is ridiculous. Klassia is clearly smart enough and was in the situation, and she would know pretty early on that bullet, well, it was nowhere near, she would have known any competent police officer, given information up front by Klassia or anyone else, would be able to assess the fact that the bullet did not happen on the rooftop. It had to come from distance. She even eventually goes to the trouble of pointing that out very clearly. But for some reason, and I really think this is just purely plot based, and to give you the drive towards, I understand why they did it, but actually it's completely illogical in my opinion that they would go to the trouble. Like there are intelligent people that get called up to look at this, right? And it contradicts the fact that the Hardy Boys see themselves as the authority in Martinez. If they believe themselves to be the true authority in Martinez, why are they worried about a RCM in the first place? Why do they feel like they need to answer to anybody and stage a lynching? And why would they not just say to any police officers that did come, look, we don't know where the shot came from. It's clearly come through this pane of glass from a distance. No one heard a shot. And I think that line of questioning would die pretty quickly, around the whirling in rags, and they would very soon find themselves at the island. So yeah, that's my controversial take. I don't think it's the finest piece of writing in the world.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it's not nonsense, but it is a little of a plot. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Your turn.
I actually need to think about it a second. I don't know, right?
It's a good question. It's a good question, isn't it? It is a very good
Absolutely.
question. When I saw that, I was like, oh. And I've had this discussion before with people about the clashier stuff, right? Because obviously people always bring up what would you do with, do you arrest her? Because the game isn't necessarily asking you, what's moral and what's right. It's basically asking whether you're willing to risk having someone die for the sake of solving the case.
Yeah, of maybe solving the case.
Yeah. It's a 50-50 chance that it works out for you, and ultimately, okay, she was deceptive, but she didn't do anything. I mean, she could be maybe accused of perverting the course of justice. Is the worst charge I think you could level at her in this situation.
But this shouldn't be a death sentence for that, which it effectively is, because the people who are after her will find her in prison. There's also the talk about if you blame her for associating with mercenary family. And there's also is that victim blaming if you say that she is probably not a very good person if she just hung around this very openly brutal war criminal all the time? That's a discussion that's very, I guess, popular too.
Yeah, I know. She's obviously got an incredibly nasty background. Like, let's not forget, okay, you might not be arresting her for that in particular, but she does have some, pretty serious crimes to answer for. The corporate espionage that she undertook was responsible for someone taking their own life, which she says she's remorseful for, but she's a very, very calculated, manipulative person.
Totally, yes.
And it's almost impossible decision really to kind of be objectively correct in what you decide. So I've contradicted myself because the Clashier stuff is also some of the best writing.
It's amazing, yeah. The way she compromises your skills and everything.
Yeah, because she's beautiful, and all of a sudden they all realise that it's going off like a, all the alarm bells are going off.
All right, I have a controversial opinion. It is a speculation about Kim that I wanted to make a short about it some day, but then I thought, okay, it's too stupid and it's probably not right. But I thought there is a non-0% chance that Kim is a moral intern agent that is sent there to spy on you. Because he is probably one of the most moral intern loyal of the RCM. He does absolutely not want you to come into contact with anything regarding the Pale Hole, the Pale in general, the church, and all of that. He is very hesitant about you communicating with the moral internship. And he basically borderline sabotages your exploration of the world. He says, don't talk to Joyce about that. It's only gonna rile you up. Don't talk to the old Pale driver. It's only gonna be weird for you. And then the old Pale driver, after you say, Kim, no, I'm gonna talk, tells you about the motorway south, about, what the Pale does with your memory. And it was exactly these conversations that Kim told me not to have that led me to the way of seeing how the Pale meddled with Harry's memory. And of course, there's also this speculation about Harry being actually some of these, so-called magpies that produce Pale that are actually, dangerous for the world if they really get into contact with these, time streams. And again, even that might again be speculation. We don't know exactly what's going on there. But it might absolutely be true that he was a dangerous individual and moral intern needs to keep him under control, and that's why they send the most normal guy available to the moral intern, and who also has a certain distrust towards communists. And Harry is absolutely, let's say, not an enemy of that ideology, because Kim, as far as I remember, lost his parents along the revolution, and so maybe Kim is not as innocent as we think. He probably is, let's be real. But there is some more to uncover.
I think, as controversial takes go, that's a pretty good one, Danny. And I would add to that, when you're talking with Sunday Friend, he's very, very... Ooh. He's like, you be very careful what you say here. Kim immediately knows that he is a superior member of the moral intern. So, yeah, I don't think it's completely bonkers, but controversial it is.
Yeah. At least that. It's a controversial speculation, maybe.
So that is the end of what I think has been an amazing conversation.
I had a blast.
It remains to be seen if the audience agree, but I get the sense that people were excited to see us talk together. So I hope that we've delivered some of that hype that you built yourselves up on the hype train. This has been the first episode of the Human Can Opener. I have been David, better known as the 41st Precinct. You have been Danny, better known as Jamrock Hobo. You can follow Jamrock Hobo on the Twitter or the X, whichever you want to prefer to call it, at Jamrock Hobo. I assume most of you already know and are subscribed to his YouTube channel, Jamrock Hobo, but there is also Jamrock Hobo Second. So make sure you subscribe to both of those. And I'm guessing if you're here watching this, you're aware of the 41st Precinct YouTube channel, so you should also subscribe to that. Otherwise, I will be sharing updates on the next episode of Human Can Opener on social media and on my community page on YouTube, so keep an eye out for that. We have some very exciting guests on the way, I promise you. And until the next time, thank you very much for watching or listening, and we'll see you again soon.
I'm very excited for the next podcasts. Thank you for having me.
No problem. Thank you very much for coming. Cheers all, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.